Nice, nice. We got a lot of people. We got Brandon Toy in the chat. Brandon Toy, you want to come in? Bob is here. I think he would like to talk to you for a minute or two.
So this video took place last Friday, and during the previous week, myself and Bob had gone back and forth with a few videos on Coriolis. If you haven't seen my original video, 3 questions for ballers on an impossible flight scenario from Anchorage to Mexico City, go and check that out. But unfortunately, I wasn't able to join this day, but something even better happened.
Okay. Well, I'd like to present Bob my my concept of air density and pressure at different altitudes and see what his response is to that. So
here in comes Chris with a scenario that is built off of, in part, my presentation and the work of others and his own work. And the numbers aren't as important as the concept. So you don't necessarily have to remember all the values in here. It's the concept of what he's saying in relation to Coriolis that is the important part.
Oh, I've already done this. I added a couple elements to it, or at least an element that we can talk about and see how it applies and affects the various flight paths. So basically, this is a question on Coriolis and how planes are impacted by Coriolis in the atmosphere. So what we're told is that at some altitude that the atmosphere is in lockstep with the rotation of the Earth, right? Obviously, as the Earth rotates, the atmosphere rotates with it and then pushes along via a force objects that are in the atmosphere, such as drones, planes, helicopters, so that they're in, again, a perfect one.
Notice Al K saying below, this is too easy to address, and then watch as we get into it what happens.
1-to-1 lockstep, which I've documented here. Perfect lockstep with Earth, 1-to-1. So here's the example, and here's the question. Okay, we have one airplane at 15,000 feet. Let's just assume that at 15,000 feet, the air density is great enough and the force is great enough to move the airplane in a perfect 1-to-1 lockstep. Okay, I've never seen that documented, but let's just go with that. Okay, so the air density at 15,000 feet is 4 times greater than at 40,000 feet. So here we have an airplane at 40,000 feet with an air density to movement ratio of 1-to-4, which is 75% less than at 15,000 feet. The Newton force on the plane at 15,000 feet is 52,976. The Newton force on the plane at 40,000 feet is 20,787. So if you were to fly a constant flight path at 15,000 feet, you're in a perfect 1-to-1 lockstep with the Earth. However, if you were to fly at 40,000 feet, that same flight path, you will move 75% less than you did at 15,000 feet, which means if you fly the same exact route at those 2 different altitudes, you must account for the difference in the force being applied on the airplane to the atmosphere. Is that correct or incorrect? Or if it's correct, what's the difference in flight path between these 2 examples?
I'm not sure I follow what you're even asking.
So essentially what Chris is asking is, if airplanes and other things within the atmosphere that are traveling on the Earth are carried in lockstep with the atmosphere, as is proposed by the heliocentric model, then how do you account for the difference at different altitudes where the air density is much less the higher up you go? How can the atmosphere carry an airplane along at 40,000 feet just as it would at 10,000 feet? Now, he cites here a 4-to-1 difference in the air density. I don't think the numbers are as important as the concept. So you would expect that up higher, it would either lag behind, or lower, it would push the plane ahead.
You could use less thrust to get the same velocity.
Well, you definitely didn't follow, because that answer doesn't make any sense.
Well, no, if the air's less dense, if the air's less dense, then there's less resistance.
which means there's less atmosphere pushing you along in lockstep with the Earth, which means you have to account more for the Coriolis variable.
No.
Yes.
No, it doesn't work like that.
I don't think the Coriolis is the atmosphere pushing anything.
No, it's not. It's not.
Okay,
That's
so
not
when
how
we ask
Coriolis works either.
So when we ask the question, if I leave Anchorage, Alaska at 300 mile per hour ground speed and I maintain 300 mile per hour tangential velocity because of the conservation of momentum, and I'm flying towards the equator, how do I gain the 700 missing mile per hour ground speed? What's the answer?
What's the tangential velocity?
Yeah. Here comes the first gambit from Erebus. What's tangential velocity? Now, why is that important to this discussion? This is one of those little tactics that the ballers love to use, throwing out a term and asking you to define it. The whole point in doing that is to obfuscate and not answer the question. So Erebus is infamous for doing this, asking questions endlessly. Let's see where it goes.
Yeah.
There's a fundamental issue here that's being missed.
And in come George. George is going to be the subject of this video today. This is probably the first in a series of videos looking at this discussion of Coriolis over the last week and the different answers that we received when we asked questions from Blue, Bob, George, and others.
The atmosphere?
Go ahead. George can go ahead and try and answer then. Nobody else
the
has.
Atmosphere?
Chris, do you realize, all right, at the surface of the Earth, if we use 3959 miles as the radius, and you want to know what the tangential speed is, it's 1,039.3 miles an hour. Okay, 1,039.3 miles an hour. That's the tangential velocity at the surface of the Earth. Okay. Now let's say you fly 5 miles up above the surface of the Earth. What do you think the tangential velocity of the atmosphere 5 miles up is compared to the surface of the Earth? How much more is it?
So here's the first clue that George has completely lost the plot. He's talking about the difference in the tangential velocity required 5 miles higher than the surface of the Earth. That has nothing to do with the question. The question is, how is it impacted by the air pressure differences at the two altitudes or the density of the atmosphere? So let's see where he takes it.
At that speed, at that height. Any idea?
You can't answer that off the
Just
top
let
of
me
your
know
head?
when you're.
Again, they ask a question. They'll either ask you to define something or they'll ask you to answer a question. Chris came in asking this question of them, and here they are playing the definition game.
You're going to answer my question, and then I'll start listening. Go ahead.
How long does it take to go from a pole to the equator?
Well, I don't know.
Now, here's the second question that Chris has been asked. How long does it take to go from a pole to the equator? What does that have to do with anything? This is one of the things that often gets up during brought up during the Coriolis discussion is, well, it's a long time, so it doesn't really matter. So if it's a 10-hour flight and you have 150 miles in Coriolis, you divide that by the 10 hours and boom, problem minimized. So I believe this is just a minimization tactic because it doesn't answer the question.
Explain my answer.
Well, I didn't say the pole. I didn't say the pole. I said Anchorage, Alaska, which you can do. You can do Anchorage, Alaska to somewhere in Mexico probably, and or South America and get the.
How long
it takes?
How long is the flight?
I don't care how long it takes. I need an
It's
answer.
relevant.
Hold on.
Now you've got the peanut gallery jumping in to try to overwhelm Chris.
Chris,
hold on, George. Wait,
because
I'm talking to George.
10 hours. No, in 10 hours you can scrub off that distance.
No.
It's insignificant.
No. That's your
George.
answer. No.
Carlos, be quiet, man. George, this is a physics question. George, this is a physics question. If I have, hold on. You guys say conservation of momentum. The only momentum I have leaving Anchorage, Alaska is 300 miles per hour.
I've already
at the equator. The momentum.
Do you know?
Can I finish?
I've already.
No, I'm asking you a question,
Chris. You have to explain my answer.
Bob, please.
Do you hear Bob in the background saying, you have to explain my answer? So George is in the middle of answering it. We've got the peanut gallery chipping in. We've got Bob coming in, asking questions that have nothing to do with the response he's looking for. And Chris is keeping his cool pretty well.
Please. Chris, do you know how to calculate the magnitude of the Coriolis force in that question you have?
George, this is...
Now, again, they're going to ask another math question. Can you calculate this? Now, the problem with these kind of questions is if you answer them, it just keeps going. Then there'll be another question. Then there'll be another question. If you refuse to answer it, then they play as if you have no ability to answer the question. So this is another rhetorical trap that they use instead of just answering the question.
This is a physics force question. If I go for 300 miles per hour in an airplane,
I'm asking you. Do you know how to calculate it?
I'm not.
It matters whether or not the force is significant or not. Do you know how to calculate the Coriolis force?
Hold on. What is the force that allows the plane to gain the additional 700 mile per hour momentum?
That's not momentum. Speed is not momentum. Momentum is speed times mass.
What is?
Now they're going to get pedantic about the definitions, as if we need to know the difference between speed and momentum in order to answer this question. It's a conceptual question, and they know damn well what he's asking. And instead, they go again to definitions to deflect.
It's the force that causes the plane to catch up with the ground speed at the equator. From 300 miles per hour to 1,000 miles per hour.
It's already been answered.
Airplanes can't go 1,000 mile.
Notice you hear somebody in the back saying, acceleration. Carlos in the back, acceleration. So we've already gotten multiple answers on this, and George is going to give us some more.
700 mile per hour.
They don't need to.
They don't need to.
They don't. The travel speed is over 10 hours. The travel speed is over 10 hours in which you...
As if the amount of time matters when you have to make up speed or momentum. You still have to make up the speed or momentum.
George, if you're flying south at 300 mile per hour tangential speed rotation and the earth below you is moving at 1,000, you're going to have to deviate and change course. Think about it, George.
Flight time that matters in the Coriolis. It's the time of flight.
Okay, well,
get it?
Most
if you're going to try to make that adjustment,
this should be Jose. Can we get a one-on-one? There's just too many people chiming in. If
you're going to try to
I noticed that. There's 3 or 4 people that are asking kind of the same question and slightly different questions to Chris. Back to back to back to back. It is not working out. Some adjustment you guys got to do.
Jose, I've already answered this question.
Chris, the flight time matters.
Absolutely not.
In Coriolis. Okay, so if you're going from Anchorage, Alaska to somewhere in Mexico, that flight is probably on the order of 10 hours trying to gain that additional speed over.
How does it gain the additional speed?
It's called.
And Chris hit the nail on the head trying to hold his feet to the fire here. Yes, over 10 hours, it may be what sounds like an unsubstantial amount of speed or momentum that the plane has to gain. But how does it do it?
Called engines in the...
Now George invokes engines. So notice he's saying engines. Engines is the way that the airplane makes up the ground.
Plane. No, look at it this way. What you're assuming is that someone's going from Anchorage, Alaska in a straight line reference to space. That's not what happens. A plane has 2 pieces of information that it goes with: altitude and heading. The fact that you keep pointing towards Mexico keeps you on the path. And with respect to the center of the earth or someone watching from space, you are going along a vector that slightly deviates to the east as the earth turns. It's very, very slight. You can go through and find that the angle is much less than 1 degree in terms of change, that you have to change your heading to reach Mexico. Think of it this way. You're out on the white sands where there's no mountains or big flat plain. And
pay close attention to this scenario that George gives here. And see if it bears any resemblance to the scenario of an airplane in the sky.
Way off in the distance, say 20 miles away, there's someone going across the white sands from left to right, okay, perpendicular to your line of sight to them. Now you're in your car and you're going to start off 20 miles away when that object way in the distance, say Blue is in his car 20 miles away.
This is a long obfuscation. I just wanted to clarify with Blue a question. This is so stupid.
No, this is
easy. All right. That was 1 minute, George. You can take 20 more seconds. Go ahead.
So he's saying, let's say there's a car 20 miles down the road, and it's coming from the left, and you're going straight perpendicular to it. And your goal is to meet the car after a certain amount of time. You're going to slightly and imperceptibly steer the car in order to meet the other car at the position 20 miles to the right.
Wrap it up. 20 more seconds.
Well, I'm trying to set it up for him. Okay, so Blue's going left to right in his car. You're headed towards Blue when he's way off to your left. Now, when you're driving to hit Blue, you don't keep going in that direction. You see Blue, and you subconsciously are making corrections to your steering wheel so that you are heading towards Blue as he goes from left to right. That's what happens to pilots.
So, address to George, but I don't need an answer from George. I just want to read this comment, and then we want to hear Chris. George, the tangential speed of the atmosphere is different at different latitudes. Chris Berry, go ahead.
I know that.
So back to the car example, it sounded as if George said that pilots subconsciously correct for Coriolis, and that's all that's necessary, which is really a non-answer. They use their engine and steering to correct for Coriolis, period. That's what he is saying.
This is a classic Brian Mullen goof up. Chris is missing the fact that the tangential velocity of the Earth adds to the plane only if you change your frame of reference from ground speed or on the surface of the Earth to something like at the center of the Earth. That's different. The plane doesn't care about what things are in reference to the center of the Earth. It's just having to do with ground speed and air speed.
So this is another obfuscation here. He's talking about relating the airplane to the center of the Earth. I don't know why it would matter looking outside down on the Earth as opposed to from the plane's point of view. We're talking about a plane flying over the surface of the Earth down to its destination. Why does it matter what reference frame we assign to one or the other? What we're asking is, how does the plane get to the right position, the right destination, with the Earth rotating underneath it?
Okay, George, we can do it again if you want. So I leave anchor.
No, I'm not going to do it anymore with you.
I have 300 mile per hour ground speed, right? Momentum, plus a max operating of 500. I'll just give you all 500.
No, you're doing it wrong again. Forget
so you do it.
The tangential velocity.
So you do it. Oh, forget about the tangential velocity that I have to get in order to keep up with the rotational tangential.
That's only with respect to the center of the Earth.
Why would the tangential velocity not matter on the surface of the Earth, but matter if you're thinking about the center of the Earth? In either scenario, the plane has to fly to its position. The same forces are involved. If it matters in one scenario, it matters in all of the scenarios. George is setting up a convoluted mathematical framework for thinking about this problem that allows them to dodge having to explain or figure out how it happens.
The air is going in lockstep with the surface of the Earth. These tangential velocities are only with respect to the center of the Earth. You're changing your reference point.
Patience, Miles.
Now we're going with lockstep. So we had engines before. We had it didn't matter. We had it matters how long the trip is. And now we have lockstep.
Brian Mullen does. Just a quick question. Hey, Blue, do you still have my phone number?
Yeah,
you still have my... Okay, give me a call when the show is done, okay? I'm out of here. There's a fallacy going on here. Chris,
Yeah.
the atmosphere is not moving with respect to the surface of the Earth. It's turning with the Earth. If there's no winds, let's just assume we have no winds, the air is static with respect to the surface of the Earth. The airplane, that's all the airplane sees is this static
That sounds
air.
like a motionless Earth to me.
Shut up. It does not, the plane does not have to gain extra speed with respect to the atmosphere. It is static as far as.
Chris hit the nose on the head, the nail on the head. What George is describing is exactly how a plane would fly over a stationary Earth. The atmosphere is static in relation to the plane. The airplane doesn't have to worry about it. The airplane doesn't need to make up any tangential speed. The airplane just flies straight towards its destination, and the atmosphere is at the same speed as the Earth, which is 0. All works out perfectly.
As far as that plane is concerned, consider this. Say you have a pole that's 10 feet long, and you have it anchored.
The graphics are mine, by the way.
Anchored on one end on the pivot point, so it can whip around in a circle, okay? You like a merry-go-round, except you've got a pole. All right, now you start that pole spinning, pivoting around. So let's say at the end of the pole has a tangential velocity with respect to the pivot point of 15 miles an hour. That's just like the surface of the Earth with respect to the center of the Earth. All right, now this thing is spinning along. There's a bug down at the pivot point. It has 0 tangential velocity. It's at the pivot point. Now it starts crawling several inches a second along this pole towards the end. It arrives at the end. Now it has a tangential velocity with respect to the pivot point of 15 miles an hour. It did.
Does anyone think that a bug is just like an airplane, and that walking on a steel rod as it rotates is equivalent to flying over a spinning sphere?
Didn't have to gain any speed. In its frame of reference along the pole, it's just crawling at a couple inches. What's going on down there? This bug is crawling along the pole. It started out with 0 tangential velocity with respect to the pivot point or the center. And now, once after a bit of time, it has 15 miles an hour. There was no gain of speed due to the atmosphere or anything it had to gain. It just crawled along that static pole, just like the plane goes along that static air, column of air that's hovering, or not hovering, but is above the Earth, that's moving along the Earth. You're conflating all these things. All you guys are...
We're conflating. Who's conflating? George is comparing a bug walking down a spinning rod to an airplane flying through the sky over a spinning sphere.
Flat earthers are mixed up with your reference frames. These tangential velocities only count with respect to the center of the Earth. The plane, all it cares about is airspeed with respect to the air in the atmosphere and ground speed. But
there, he says it again. All the airplane cares about is its airspeed and its speed relative to the ground. Exactly like on a stationary Earth.
The atmosphere has no ground speed.
Atmosphere has no ground speed.
It is 0 velocity with respect to the surface of the Earth, and the plane is just flying through that static air that is not moving. It doesn't have to put on more fuel to gain more speed or be pushed along with the atmosphere. It's a reference frame problem that
if it's all in the same reference frame, then why would there be any deviation for ballistics or anything else that flew through the reference frame? The Coriolis effect is described as a problem between an inertial and a non-inertial reference frame.
That you're not grasping. Hey, Blue, everyone here will understand the issue if they can resolve for themselves the the issue that I brought up about a bug on a rotating pole.
Come on, buddy. Just get on the end of the stick. Just for a minute. I'll put you back. Come on. Come on. Just get on the stick. By the way, I did get the bug on the stick, but I had some difficulty finding some gas for the engine that I strapped the pole to. So, oh well. Maybe next time.